Millionaire man sees boy begging in the rain with twin babies, and what she discovered made her cry. A 10-year-old boy stood in the freezing rain outside the entrance to Meridian Tower, clutching two infant carriers against his thin chest, while water streamed down his face like tears he was too exhausted to cry. His name was Marcus, and the babies he protected were his twin sisters, born 3 months ago when their mother died giving birth and their father disappeared into the night, leaving 3 children to navigate a world that had no patience for their desperation. Inside the gleaming skyscraper, billionaire tech mogul Elena Vasquez was finishing another 18-hour day, building an empire that had made her one of the most powerful women in America. She had everything money could buy, except the ability to sleep through the guilt that whispered in the darkness about the family she had lost, the child she had failed to save, the love she had buried beneath layers of success and ambition. Marcus had been living on the streets for 6 weeks, ever since the social workers had tried to separate him from his baby sisters, explaining with clinical detachment that different foster homes would be more appropriate for children of such different ages. The 12-year-old boy who had been changing diapers and warming formula over public bathroom sinks knew that appropriate was just another word adults used when they didn't want to keep families together, when bureaucratic convenience mattered more than the bonds between siblings who had already lost everything else. He had grabbed the babies and run, choosing homelessness over separation, choosing the uncertainty of the streets over the certainty of never seeing his sisters again. For 6 weeks, he had begged for formula money outside grocery stores, slept in doorways and abandoned buildings, and learned that society's compassion for children had strict limitations that evaporated when those children became inconvenient or difficult to categorize. The rain that soaked Marcus to the bone was the same storm that drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Elena's corner office 40 stories above the street, but the distance between their worlds was measured in more than just elevation. Elena had built her fortune in artificial intelligence and data analytics, creating algorithms that could predict human behavior with startling accuracy, but she had never developed software capable of processing the grief that consumed her every waking moment. 2 years ago, her 8-year-old daughter Sophia had died from leukemia, slipping away despite the best medical care money could buy, despite Elena's desperate attempts to fund research, despite promises from doctors who had ultimately proven as powerless as everyone else when faced with the arbitrary cruelty of childhood cancer. The woman who could solve complex technical problems with elegant code had been unable to solve the only problem that truly mattered. Elena's success had become both her salvation and her prison, a way of staying busy enough to avoid confronting the emptiness that Sophia's death had carved out of her soul. She worked obsessively, acquiring companies and launching initiatives with the mechanical precision of someone who had learned that motion could substitute for meaning, that achievement could mask the absence of joy. Her penthouse apartment was a monument to wealth and taste, filled with art and luxury that Sophia would never see, equipped with every comfort except the laughter of a child who would never come home from school again. Elena's employees respected her brilliance and feared her perfectionism, but none of them understood that her demanding schedule was really an elaborate form of escape, a way of avoiding the silence that reminded her of conversations she would never have with a daughter who existed now only in photographs and memories. The irony was that Elena's company specialized in family safety technology, GPS trackers for children, emergency alert systems for parents, sophisticated software that helped families stay connected and protected. She had built an empire helping other people safeguard what she had been unable to protect, creating tools that might have saved Sophia if cancer were something that could be prevented with better monitoring or faster response times. Every product launch was both a tribute to her daughter's memory and a reminder of her own failure. Every success story from grateful parents a knife that twisted deeper into wounds that refused to heal. Elena told herself that her work honored Sophia's legacy, but in her darkest moments, she knew it was really just an expensive form of penance, a way of trying to earn forgiveness for sins that existed only in her own broken heart. Tonight, like every night for the past 2 years, Elena stood at her office window, staring down at the city below, searching for something she couldn't name among the lights and shadows that stretched toward the horizon. She had been working for 18 hours straight, pushing herself through meetings and decisions with a relentless focus that had made her famous in Silicon Valley, but it also cost her every meaningful relationship in her life. Her ex-husband had remarried and started a new family, moving on in ways that Elena couldn't understand or forgive, building happiness with someone who hadn't failed to save their child. The window reflected her own image back at her. A successful woman in an expensive suit, surrounded by the trappings of achievement that felt as substantial as smoke when weighed against the absence of a little girl's voice calling her mama. Elena's attention was drawn to movement in the plaza below, a small figure huddled beneath the building's entrance overhang, where the security lights created a circle of visibility in the storm. At first, she assumed it was another homeless person seeking shelter, a common sight that usually prompted her to call building security for removal. But something about the size and posture of the figure made her look more closely. Through the rain-streaked glass, she could make out what appeared to be a child, but that seemed impossible. No child would be alone on the streets at this hour, in this weather, without some adult taking responsibility for their safety. Elena found herself pressing closer to the window, trying to understand what she was seeing, why a child-sized figure was sitting motionless in the rain while carrying what looked like bundles in their arms. The realization hit her like a physical blow when she understood that the bundles were infant carriers, that the child below was not just homeless, but responsible for babies who couldn't survive without constant care and protection. Elena's breath fogged the glass as she stared down at a scene that violated every assumption she had about how the world worked, how society protected its most vulnerable members, how children were supposed to be safe and cared for by adults who understood their responsibility. The boy, she could see now that it was definitely a boy, was maybe 10 or 11 years old, certainly no older than Sophia would have been if she had lived, and he was sitting in a rainstorm while trying to keep two infants dry with nothing but his own body as shelter. Elena's hands shook as she reached for her phone, her first instinct to call the police or Child Protective Services, but something stopped her as she watched the boy adjust the carriers with practiced efficiency, checking on the babies with the careful attention of someone who had been doing this for weeks or months. The scene below was heartbreaking, but it was also beautiful in a way that made Elena's chest ache with recognition. This was what love looked like when stripped of every comfort and convenience, when reduced to its most essential element of one person willing to sacrifice everything for the well-being of others. The boy's devotion to those babies was absolute and pure, unmarked by the complications that usually accompanied adult relationships, uncompromised by the selfishness that Elena had discovered in her own heart when Sophia's illness had tested every bond in her life. The storm was getting worse, and Elena could see that the boy was losing his battle against the elements, his small body shaking with cold while he tried to position himself to shield the babies from wind-driven rain that seemed to be coming from every direction at once. The building's security guards would find him eventually and move him along, standard procedure for dealing with homeless individuals who sought shelter on private property. But Elena realized that she couldn't let that happen, couldn't allow this child and these babies to be pushed back out into the storm by people who were just following policy without understanding the human cost of their actions. She had spent 2 years avoiding children, unable to bear the reminder of what she had lost. But watching this boy care for his sisters with such desperate tenderness was breaking through defenses she hadn't even realized she still maintained. Elena made a decision that surprised her with its swiftness and certainty, calling building security not to have the boy removed, but to have him brought upstairs immediately, along with whatever he was carrying, with instructions that he should be treated with gentleness and respect. "There's a child in the plaza," she told the security supervisor, her voice steady despite the emotions churning in her chest. "He has babies with him. Bring them to my office now, and make sure they're warm and dry." The supervisor's confusion was evident in his pause, but Elena's authority in the building was absolute. Her instructions followed without question, even when they seemed unusual or unexpected. As she waited for the elevator to bring them up, Elena found herself pacing her office like an expectant mother, her heart racing with an anticipation she hadn't felt since Sophia's death had taught her that hope was a luxury she could no longer afford. When the elevator doors opened, Elena's breath caught in her throat as she saw Marcus up close for the first time. A thin boy with intelligent eyes and clothes that had been clean once, but were now soaked and stained from weeks of survival on city streets. He held the infant carriers protectively against his chest, his body language wary but defiant, ready to fight, if necessary, to protect the babies who were clearly the center of his universe. The twins were perhaps 3 months old, beautiful despite their circumstances, sleeping peacefully in carriers that Marcus had somehow managed to keep dry even while his own shirt was soaked through to the skin. Elena felt something shift inside her chest as she looked at this unlikely family. This boy who had chosen love over safety, responsibility over childhood, sacrifice over the easy path that would have led to foster care and separation. Were their names? Elena asked softly, approaching slowly so as not to startle Marcus, who looked ready to bolt despite the storm waiting outside. The boy's grip on the carriers tightened as he studied her face, trying to determine whether this wealthy woman in her expensive office represented another threat to be navigated or possibly, hopefully, someone who might help without demanding too high a price in return. Maya and Mia, he said finally, his voice hoarse from cold and exhaustion, but filled with pride as he spoke their names. They're my sisters. I take care of them. The simple statement carried the weight of a sacred vow, a declaration that this boy had made himself responsible for these children's lives and would defend that responsibility against anyone who tried to take it away from him. Elena knelt down to Marcus's eye level, her expensive suit forgotten as she focused entirely on this child who reminded her so painfully and beautifully of Sophia's fierce independence and determination. "How long have you been taking care of them?" she asked, though she could guess the answer from the practiced way Marcus handled the carriers, from the efficient movements that spoke of weeks of learning through trial and error how to keep babies alive under impossible circumstances. "Since Mama died," Marcus replied, his matter-of-fact tone breaking Elena's heart with its acceptance of tragedy that no child should have to bear. "The people wanted to take them away, put them somewhere else, but they belong with me. I'm their family." The word family hung between them like a bridge, connecting Elena's loss to Marcus's determination, her grief to his love. As Elena helped Marcus out of his wet jacket and wrapped him in a blanket from her office couch, she began to understand the full scope of what this boy had accomplished through sheer force of will and devotion. He had kept 2 infants alive for weeks without reliable shelter, formula, or medical care, navigating bureaucratic systems that were designed to separate siblings, surviving on charity and determination, while most adults couldn't handle the responsibility of caring for healthy children in comfortable homes. The twins were clean, fed, and clearly loved despite their circumstances, proof that Marcus possessed a maturity and capability that shamed most of the parents Elena had known, including herself when faced with Sophia's illness and her own helplessness in the face of forces beyond her control. "Are you hungry?" Elena asked, though Marcus's thin frame already provided the answer to that question. As she ordered food from the building's executive dining room, she watched Marcus check on his sisters with the automatic precision of someone who had learned that constant vigilance was the price of keeping the people you love alive and safe. The boy's devotion was absolute and unself-conscious, unmarked by the resentment or martyrdom that often accompanied adult sacrifice, simply the natural expression of love that had found its purpose in protecting 2 small lives that depended entirely on his continued strength and determination. Elena felt tears gathering in her eyes as she recognized something she had lost when Sophia died. The fierce joy that came from being needed, from having a purpose that transcended personal comfort or convenience, from knowing that someone else's happiness depended entirely on your willingness to put their needs before your own. As Marcus ate the first hot meal he'd had in days, Elena learned the full story of how this unlikely family had ended up in her building's plaza, and each detail was more heartbreaking than the last. Their mother, Carmen, had been a single parent working 2 jobs to support her children, but complications during the twins' birth had led to her death and Marcus's father's immediate abandonment of all 3 children. Social services had initially placed them together in emergency foster care, But the placement had fallen through when the foster parents decided that caring for newborn twins plus a grieving 10-year-old was more responsibility than they wanted to handle. The caseworker solution had been to split the family up. Easier placements, better outcomes, more manageable caseloads for everyone involved except the children who would lose each other forever. Marcus had listened to adults discuss his sisters like they were problems to be solved rather than people to be loved, and he had made a decision that would have impressed military strategists with its clarity and determination. The escape had been planned with the precision of someone much older than 10. Marcus using his knowledge of the foster system's bureaucratic inefficiencies to disappear during a routine appointment, taking his sisters and vanishing into the maze of city services that were supposed to help families, but often just shuffled them from one inadequate solution to another. For 6 weeks, he had lived by his wits and the kindness of strangers, learning which churches served free meals, which public buildings had clean bathrooms where he could change diapers, which police officers would offer help rather than asking too many questions about why a child was caring for babies without any adults around. The boy had developed survival skills that most adults never acquired, creating routines and safety protocols that kept his family together even when they had nowhere safe to sleep and no guarantee of where their next meal would come from. Elena found herself taking notes as Marcus described his daily schedule. Wake up at sunrise to avoid police sweeps of homeless encampments. Walk to the library where he could use bathrooms and sometimes access internet to research infant care. Spend afternoons near grocery stores where mothers with children were most likely to offer help with formula or diapers. Find shelter before dark in doorways or abandoned buildings where they wouldn't be disturbed until morning. The logistics were staggering in their complexity, requiring Marcus to think several steps ahead while simultaneously caring for babies who needed feeding every few hours, diaper changes throughout the day, and constant monitoring for signs of illness or distress. Elena's respect for this child grew with every detail, her understanding of what real strength looked like fundamentally altered by watching a 10-year-old explain how he had managed to keep his family alive through determination and love. But the most devastating part of Marcus's story wasn't the hardship or the danger. It was his absolute certainty that he was doing the right thing, his unwavering belief that keeping his sisters safe was worth any sacrifice he might have to make. "They need me," he explained simply when Elena asked why he hadn't tried to contact relatives or seek help from official agencies. "Maya cries if I'm not there when she wakes up, and Mia only sleeps if I'm singing to her. The people want to put them in different houses, but they belong together. We're family." The boy's understanding of family was pure and uncompromising, based not on blood relationships or legal documents, but on love and commitment and the daily choice to put someone else's needs before your own comfort or safety. Elena realized that she was crying, tears streaming down her face as she listened to this child articulate truths about love and sacrifice that she had forgotten in her grief over Sophia's death. Marcus noticed her tears with the alert concern of someone who had learned to read adult emotions for signs of danger or opportunity, his body tensing as he prepared to grab his sisters and run if this wealthy woman turned out to be another threat disguised as help. "I'm not crying because I'm sad," Elena said quickly, understanding his fear. "I'm crying because you're the most incredible big brother these babies could ever have, and because you remind me of someone very special who I lost." The honesty in her voice seemed to reassure Marcus, his shoulders relaxing slightly as he recognized something genuine in her tears, something that spoke to shared understanding of what it meant to love someone more than life itself. That night, Elena made a series of phone calls that would change everything for Marcus and his sisters, but also for herself in ways she was only beginning to understand. Her first call was to the best family law attorney in the city, a woman who specialized in cases involving children's rights and who had worked miracles for families caught in bureaucratic nightmares similar to Marcus's situation. Elena's wealth and connections opened doors that had been firmly closed to a homeless 10-year-old, her influence creating opportunities for legal solutions that would keep the family together while ensuring the babies received proper medical care and Marcus could return to school. But even as she worked to solve the immediate crisis, Elena found herself thinking about longer-term possibilities, about what it would mean to become truly involved in these children's lives rather than just providing temporary assistance. The legal pathway was complex but navigable with sufficient resources and expertise. Elena could petition to become the children's guardian, providing them with stable housing, health care, and education while Marcus maintained his role as their primary caregiver and emotional anchor. The arrangement would require home studies, psychological evaluations, and approval from multiple agencies, but Elena's spotless background and unlimited financial resources made her an ideal candidate for guardianship from the state's perspective. More importantly, it would allow Marcus to remain with his sisters while receiving the support he needed to simply be a child again, to attend school and make friends and develop interests beyond the constant vigilance required for survival on the streets. As Elena outlined her proposal to Marcus, she watched his face cycle through emotions too complex for someone his age to be processing. Relief, hope, suspicion, and a profound wariness born from weeks of learning that adult promises often came with hidden costs or unexpected conditions. "You would let me stay with them?" he asked carefully, his hands instinctively moving to the carriers where Maya and Mia slept peacefully, unaware that their future was being decided by adults in an office 40 stories above the streets where they had been born into homelessness. "Not just stay with them," Elena clarified, "but continue being their big brother while I help with everything else, the grown-up stuff like doctors and schools, and making sure you have everything you need to take care of each other." The conversation continued through the night, Elena and Marcus working out details of an arrangement that would give these children the stability they needed while honoring the bonds that Marcus had protected with such fierce determination. Elena found herself remembering Sophia's laugh, the way her daughter had approached problems with the same direct honesty that Marcus brought to every question about their future together. "Why do you want to help us?" Marcus asked at one point, his 10-year-old wisdom cutting straight to the heart of Elena's motivations. "Because I had a little girl who was brave like you," Elena answered, "and I wasn't able to save her. But maybe I can help save you and your sisters, and maybe that's what she would want me to do." The moment of truth came when Elena asked Marcus if he trusted her enough to let her help, knowing that trust was not something this boy gave easily after weeks of learning that most adults would disappoint or betray him if given the opportunity. Marcus studied her face with the intensity of someone whose survival had depended on reading people correctly, looking for signs of deception or hidden agendas that might threaten his sister's safety. What he saw instead was something he recognized from his own reflection. The look of someone who had lost everything that mattered and was trying to figure out how to build meaning from the wreckage. "Okay," he said finally, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was agreeing to. "But if you ever try to separate us, I'll take them and run again. They're my family, and families stay together." Elena's response was immediate and fervent. "Families do stay together, and I promise you that nobody will ever separate you from Maya and Mia as long as I have anything to say about it." The vow carried the weight of her own loss, her understanding of what it meant to have family torn away by forces beyond anyone's control, her determination to protect these children from the kind of devastation that had defined her life since Sophia's death. As Marcus finally allowed himself to sleep in a safe, warm place while his sisters dozed peacefully nearby, Elena stood at her window, looking down at the plaza where she had first seen them, understanding that her life had just taken a turn she couldn't have imagined when she woke up that morning in her empty penthouse apartment. 6 months later, Elena's penthouse had been transformed from a sterile monument to wealth into a home filled with the chaos and joy that only children can bring. Maya and Mia were thriving under the care of pediatricians Elena had personally vetted, their development on track despite their traumatic start in life, their laughter echoing through rooms that had been silent for too long. Marcus attended an elite private school where his intelligence and determination earned respect from teachers who marveled at his maturity and dedication to his studies. But more importantly, he was learning to be a child again, playing soccer, making friends, discovering interests beyond the survival skills that had kept his family alive during their darkest weeks. The boy who had once begged for formula money now helped Elena with her business decisions, his street-smart perspective providing insights that boardrooms full of MBAs had missed. The legal proceedings had been completed with remarkable efficiency. Elena's guardianship approved by judges who recognized that these children had found their way to exactly where they belonged. Marcus retained his role as the twins' primary emotional caretaker, but now he had support from nannies, pediatricians, and tutors who understood that his bond with his sisters was sacred and non-negotiable. Elena's wealth had solved the practical problems: housing, healthcare, education, legal protection, but it was her genuine love for these children that had healed the deeper wounds left by loss and abandonment. The woman who had built an empire in artificial intelligence discovered that the most sophisticated algorithm could never replicate the simple miracle of a family choosing to love each other unconditionally. Elena's relationship with Marcus had evolved into something that surprised both of them with its depth and authenticity. The boy had become her advisor, her companion, and sometimes her teacher, showing her how to find joy in small moments and purpose in daily acts of care. Marcus taught Elena how to braid Maya's hair, how to make Mia laugh by making silly faces, how to read bedtime stories with different voices for each character. In return, Elena showed Marcus that adults could be trusted to keep their promises, that wealth could be used to protect rather than exploit, that love could create safety even in a world that seemed designed to separate families and destroy hope. Their relationship was built on mutual respect and shared understanding of what it meant to lose everything and somehow find the strength to rebuild. The transformation in Elena was visible to everyone who knew her. The driven, isolated billionaire had become a woman who left the office at reasonable hours to attend school plays and soccer games, who scheduled board meetings around nap time and family dinners, who found that the most important algorithms in her life were the ones that predicted when babies needed feeding and 10-year-old boys needed encouragement. Her employees noticed that she smiled more, that her decision-making had become more thoughtful and compassionate, that she had developed an uncanny ability to spot problems that affected working families. Elena's company began offering unprecedented benefits for employee families: on-site childcare, paid family leave, adoption assistance, emergency support funds, policies that reflected her new understanding of what really mattered in people's lives. The twins were walking now, their first steps taken in Elena's living room while Marcus cheered, and Elena recorded every moment with the dedication of someone who understood that childhood was both precious and fleeting. Maya had inherited her brother's determination, charging toward any obstacle with fearless enthusiasm, while Mia was more cautious and thoughtful, studying situations before deciding how to proceed. Both girls adored Marcus with the complete trust of children who had never known a world where their big brother wasn't there to protect and care for them. And Marcus had grown into his role as their guardian and guide with a maturity that amazed everyone who witnessed their family dynamic. The boy who had once begged in the rain now stood with Elena at charity galas and business conferences, sometimes sharing their story with audiences who left with tears in their eyes and checks in their hands for organizations that helped homeless families. Marcus had become an advocate for children aging out of foster care, for keeping siblings together, for recognizing that love and commitment mattered more than traditional family structures or economic status. Elena's foundation, now co-directed by Marcus despite his young age, had helped hundreds of families navigate crises similar to their own, proving that their story was not just about personal healing, but about systemic change that could protect other children from unnecessary separation and suffering. The evening routine in Elena's home was a symphony of ordinary miracles. Dinner conversations in multiple languages as Marcus practiced Spanish for school. Elena taught the twins basic computer programming concepts through games and songs. Bath time filled with laughter and splashing. Bedtime stories that always ended with Marcus checking on his sisters one final time before Elena tucked him into his own bed in the room next to theirs. The woman who had once worked 18-hour days to avoid confronting her grief now looked forward to these quiet moments when her house felt full of the love and laughter that made all her professional success seem secondary to the simple miracle of having a family to come home to every night. If the story moved you, maybe it's the sign you needed today. If it is, subscribe. The millionaire who had everything except what mattered most had discovered that sometimes the greatest treasures come disguised as the greatest challenges, that sometimes the very thing you think will break you is actually the thing that will save you, and that families are not just born but can be chosen, built, and sustained by people brave enough to love beyond the boundaries of convention or expectation.